The Chaos Sorcerer Benny Bobo Chapter 1 Awakening. The first thing Benny Bobo noticed was the grass. Not the soft, manicured lawn of a suburban park, but wild grass, thick, uneven, and slightly damp against his bare skin. His bare skin, everywhere. His eyes snapped open to a sky so blue it hurt to look at. No smog, no telephone wires, just endless azure stretching above him, dotted with clouds that looked like they'd been painted by someone who'd never heard of pollution. What the? He bolted upright, then immediately regretted it as a wave of dizziness washed over him. When his vision cleared, he looked down at himself, completely naked. Oh God, no, no, no. He scrambled to his feet, arms crossing over himself instinctively as he spun in a circle. Trees surrounded him on all sides, massive oaks and pines that formed a natural wall around a clearing of wildflowers and grass. In the distance, maybe 50 yards away, he could see the glimmer of water, a lake. No buildings, no roads, no people, and definitely no clothes. Okay, Sam, he muttered to himself, then paused. Had someone drugged him? Was this some kind of elaborate prank? The last thing he remembered was the donut, the police car, the choking, the feeling of his throat closing, the desperate gasping, the officer's face blurry through bulletproof glass, unable to help. I died, he whispered. The words felt absurd leaving his mouth, but somehow he knew it was true. I died choking on a donut after rear-ending a cop. He laughed. It came out high-pitched and slightly hysterical. Of all the stupid ways to... He cut himself off, looking around again. So what? Is this heaven? Hell? Some kind of weird afterlife waiting room? The gentle breeze felt real enough. The grass beneath his feet felt real. The overwhelming embarrassment of being completely naked in a known location felt very real. Could I have some clothes? He called out to the empty field, half joking, half desperate. The air shimmered. It started as a tingling sensation across his skin, like static electricity before a storm. Then, between one blink and the next, fabric materialized on his body. A robe, simple brown made of rough-spun cloth, settled over his shoulders and fell to his knees. He stared down at himself, then up at the sky, then back at the robe. What? He grabbed the fabric, tugging at it. Solid, real, not a hallucination. Could I have a sandwich, he tried. Nothing. Could I have $1 million? Still nothing. Could I have a pointy wizard hat? The air shimmered again. Weight settled on his head. He reached up and felt the unmistakable cone of a stereotypical wizard's hat, complete with a wide brim. Holy shit, he breathed. I have magic. He stood there for a long moment, processing. Dead. Reincarnated, or transported, or whatever this was, in another world, with magic. Wearing a robe and a wizard hat he'd literally wished into existence. Okay, he said aloud, trying to steady his breathing. Okay, this is happening. This is real. I'm not Sam Winters anymore. Sam Winters died choking on a donut like an idiot. He needed a new name, a fresh start, something that didn't remind him of his old life, his old failures, his old death. Benny, he said, testing it out. It sounded friendly, approachable. Not like someone who'd spent 5 years working the night shift at Walmart. Benny. Bobo. He winced. Benny Bobo? Really? That's what we're going with? But somehow it felt right, ridiculous and perfect at the same time. Benny Bobo looked toward the lake, then back at the trees. Somewhere beyond this clearing, there had to be civilization, people, answers, and maybe, just maybe, an explanation for why he could conjure clothing out of thin air. He took his first step forward, wizard hat bobbing slightly with each movement, and began walking toward the distant tree line. His new life, whatever it was going to be, had begun. The Chaos Sorcerer Benny Bobo Chapter 1. The road to somewhere, probably. Benny took 2 confident steps forward, feeling like some kind of fantasy protagonist finally beginning their epic journey, when his bare foot came down directly on something that felt like nature's own personal torture device. Yow! He hopped backward on one leg, clutching his injured foot with both hands, the wizard hat tumbling off his head and landing in the grass. The pain was exquisite, a sharp, focused agony that suggested he'd just stepped on the world's most malicious rock. Son of a... Still hopping, still not looking where he was going, he brought his other foot down. On the exact same rock. Are you kidding me? Benny shrieked, now hopping on the foot that had originally been injured while clutching the newly wounded one. He looked like some deranged flamingo performing an interpretive dance about suffering. The hopping became more frantic, more desperate, his balance completely shot. Gravity, ever the comedian, decided this was the perfect moment to assert itself. Benny's supporting leg gave out. He toppled backward, arms windmilling uselessly, and crashed to the ground. In what could only be described as cosmic injustice, his tailbone landed directly on, you guessed it, the same rock. The impact drove the air from his lungs in a strangled wheeze. For a moment, Benny just lay there, sprawled in the grass like a broken marionette, staring up at the impossibly blue sky, while his brain tried to process the trifecta of pain radiating from both feet and his rear end. That, he gasped, rolling onto his side and curling into something approximating the fetal position, really hurt. That really, really hurt. He clutched at his feet, rocking slightly. What kind of evil rock? Who designed this field? This is the worst welcome to a magical fantasy world ever. The pain throbbed with each heartbeat. His left foot, his right foot, his tailbone, a trinity of agony. And then, quite suddenly, it stopped. Not gradually, not a slow fading, just gone. Like someone had flipped a switch, Benny froze, still holding his feet, waiting for the pain to return. It didn't. He cautiously flexed one foot, then the other. Nothing. He shifted his weight, testing his tailbone. Not even a twinge. What the? He sat up slowly, examining his feet. No cuts, no bruises, no marks of any kind. It was as if the injury had never happened. Did I just heal myself? Or does pain just not work right here? He filed that away as something to investigate later, assuming he survived long enough to have a later. Looking down at his bare feet, still surrounded by grass that apparently concealed numerous instruments of torture disguised as innocent rocks, a thought occurred to him. Could I have some shoes? The now familiar shimmer of air, the static electricity tingle across his skin. Weight materialized on his feet. Benny looked down and blinked. Sandals, not modern flip-flops or athletic sandals, but proper ancient-style sandals with leather straps that wound up his calves. They looked like something a Roman soldier might have worn, or maybe a biblical prophet. They were actually kind of cool in a historical reenactment sort of way. Huh. Not what I expected, but okay. He stood up carefully, testing the sandals. They fit perfectly, molding to his feet like they'd been custom-made. The leather was soft but sturdy. These'll work. Better than going barefoot through Rock Minefield Meadow anyway. He retrieved his wizard hat from where it had fallen and put it back on. As he adjusted it, another thought struck him. He lifted the hem of his robe and looked down, still completely naked underneath. Oh, come on. Heat rushed to his face. Here he was, dressed like some wise wizard, and underneath he was one strong breeze away from a very embarrassing situation. Could I have some underwear? Shimmer, tingle, the sensation of fabric appearing against his skin. He lifted the robe again and nodded with satisfaction. Clean white underwear, simple and functional. Not fancy, but definitely better than nothing. Okay, so the magic system provides basic necessities. Good to know. He let the robe fall back into place. Let's see what else we can do. Could I have some food? The air shimmered in front of him. A wooden bowl materialized and dropped into his hands with a soft thunk. Benny stared at it. The bowl contained something. A brownish liquid that might have been broth, or might have been dishwater, or might have been something he didn't want to think about. Carved into the side of the bowl, in rough letters, was the word soup. Soup, Benny said flatly. Generic soup. Labeled soup. He peered into the bowl. The liquid had no visible ingredients, no vegetables, no meat, no noodles, just soup-colored liquid. This is the saddest thing I've ever seen, and I used to eat ramen noodles for every meal. He set the bowl down in the grass and tried again. Could I have a sandwich? Nothing happened. Could I have a turkey sandwich? Still nothing. A donut? He winced even as he said it, the memory of his death still fresh. No? Probably for the best. Could I have bread? The air didn't even shimmer this time. An apple? Nope. Water? Not a thing. But soup works? Benny picked up the bowl and glared at it. Generic, unlabeled, sad-looking soup, but nothing actually edible? He stood up and hurled the bowl as hard as he could. It arced through the air, soup sloshing, and landed somewhere in the tall grass with a distant splash. This magic system is broken! He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. Getting angry at mysterious magical rules wouldn't help. He needed to think logically. He could summon clothing. That worked fine. He could summon objects, apparently, though he hadn't tested the limits. But food seemed restricted, or at least weirdly literal in an unhelpful way. Fine! Fine, we'll figure out the food situation later. First, let's get out of this field before I step on another kamikaze rock. Benny looked around. Trees in every direction. The lake to his... He squinted. West? Maybe? He had no idea. The sun was high overhead, not helpful for navigation. He'd never been good at that outdoorsy stuff. He picked a direction that looked slightly more open than the others. What he didn't know was north, though the knowledge wouldn't have helped him anyway, since he had no idea where anything was in this world. Should have been a Boy Scout, he muttered, starting forward. Should have learned navigation and survival skills instead of spending every weekend playing video games and eating junk food. But no, Sam Winters was too cool for wholesome outdoor activities. He paused. Not Sam Winters anymore. Benny Bobo. I'm Benny Bobo now. New world, new name, new incredibly stupid death in my past that I'm never telling anyone about. The grass whispered around his sandals as he walked. After a few steps, another thought occurred to him. Could I have a walking stick? This time, the magic responded differently. Instead of something appearing in the air, he felt a vibration in the ground beneath his feet. Right in front of him, the earth bulged slightly. Grass parted. A wooden staff. No, not a staff, more like a thick branch, pushed up from the soil like some kind of time-lapse plant growth. It rose to about chest height and then stopped. Perfectly smooth, perfectly straight, with a slight curve at the top that fit his hand like it had been designed specifically for him. Benny grabbed it and pulled. It came free of the earth with a soft sucking sound, leaving no hole behind. The grass simply folded back into place as if nothing had happened. Okay, that was actually pretty cool. He hefted the walking stick, testing its weight. Solid, real, useful. So objects can be summoned directly or grown? Manifested from the environment? He filed that observation away too. What else can we do? He thought bigger. Could I have a motorcycle? Nothing happened, not even a shimmer. A horse? Still nothing. A wagon? A cart? He trailed off. Okay, so no vehicles or no animals? Or I have to be more specific? Or there are limits to what can be created? He sighed. I really wish this came with an instruction manual. The walk was pleasant enough, he supposed. The weather was perfect, warm but not hot, with a gentle breeze that rustled through the trees. Birds sang in the canopy above. If he hadn't been completely lost in an unfamiliar world with no idea where he was going or how he'd survive, it might have been nice. Could I have some coffee? He asked the air, not really expecting an answer. Yes, a voice said. Benny spun around. Who said that? No, another voice contradicted. He turned again. Nothing. No one. Just trees. Hello, he called out. Is someone there? Silence. Then from somewhere to his left, maybe. Probably not, came a voice from his right. Benny's grip tightened on his walking stick. The voices were coming from, he looked up, the trees. The voices were coming from the trees themselves, somehow emanating from the trunks and branches. Are the trees talking to me? Obviously, one tree said, sounding vaguely condescending. That's debatable, another countered. I hate this world already. Benny announced to no one in particular. I've been here less than an hour and I already hate it. Talking trees that can't agree on anything, magic that gives me sad soup but won't give me real food, and apparently pain just randomly stops for no reason. This is worse than working at Walmart. At least there I understood the rules. The trees didn't respond. Maybe they'd gotten bored with him, or maybe they only talked when he asked questions. He decided not to experiment. The last thing he needed was a philosophical debate with argumentative foliage. He kept walking and walking and walking. The sun crawled across the sky with agonizing slowness. Benny's legs began to ache. His stomach growled. He tried summoning food twice more. Once asking for a meal, which produced another bowl labeled food containing gray mush, and once asking for something to eat, which produced a bowl labeled sustenance with what looked like oatmeal but tasted like absolutely nothing. He ate the oatmeal that wasn't oatmeal because he was starving, and it sat in his stomach like a lump of flavorless paste. The trees eventually thinned out. The terrain became hillier. Benny climbed up slopes and down into valleys, using his walking stick for balance. His sandals held up remarkably well, never chafing or causing blisters. Either the magic had made them perfectly fitted, or his feet had inherited some kind of video game protagonist durability. The sun touched the horizon, then sank below it. Twilight painted the world in shades of purple and deep blue. Benny kept walking. Stars emerged overhead, more than he'd ever seen on Earth. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like someone had spilled diamond dust across black velvet. It was beautiful. It was also not helpful for finding civilization. "Should have asked for a flashlight," he muttered, "or a lantern, or anything that produces light." But he didn't stop, couldn't stop, because stopping meant sitting alone in the dark in an unfamiliar world with talking trees and mysterious magic, and no idea if there were predators or monsters or worse things lurking in the shadows. So Benny Bobo walked through the night, his wizard hat askew, his brown robe dusty from travel, his walking stick tapping against the ground with each step. Hours passed. The moon rose, a fat, silvery disk that looked slightly larger than Earth's moon. It provided enough light to see by, at least. Benny's exhaustion deepened into a kind of numb determination, one foot in front of the other. Keep moving. Eventually he'd find something. A road, a town, a person, anything. Midnight came and went, marked by absolutely nothing since Benny had no way to tell time, and then finally, blessedly, his walking stick hit something solid. He looked down a road, an actual honest-to-God road, not paved, but packed dirt worn smooth by countless travelers. It stretched left and right, cutting through the rolling hills like a ribbon. "Oh, thank God," Benny breathed. "Civilization. This has to lead to civilization." He looked left, then right. Of course, no signs. That would be too easy. Left or right. 50-50 chance. He thought about it for exactly 3 seconds, then shrugged. Left it is. He turned left and started walking along the road. The packed dirt was easier on his feet than the uneven terrain had been. His pace picked up slightly, energy renewed by the hope that he might actually find people soon. The temperature began to drop. At first, Benny didn't notice. He was too focused on putting one foot in front of the other. But after what might have been 20 minutes or an hour, time had become meaningless. He realized he was shivering. The pleasant warmth of the day had vanished completely. The night air had gone from cool to cold to actively hostile. His breath came out in visible puffs of white vapor. "Why is it so cold?" he asked through chattering teeth. "It was perfectly nice all day." The temperature continued to plummet. Benny's fingers went numb. His nose felt like it might fall off. The thin robe and basic underwear provided almost no insulation against what had become genuinely freezing conditions. He hugged himself, trying to preserve body heat, but it was like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. The cold seeped through the fabric, through his skin, into his very bones. "This is ridiculous." His voice came out high and strained. "It's the middle of summer, or spring, or whatever season this is. Why is it Arctic all of a sudden?" The wind picked up, cutting through his robe like it wasn't even there. Benny's shivering became violent, uncontrollable. His teeth chattered so hard he was afraid they might crack. "Could I have a coat?" he tried. A heavy cloak materialized around his shoulders. It helped, marginally. But the cold was supernatural in its intensity now, like he'd wandered into a magical freezer. His legs were going numb. His hands had stopped feeling like hands and started feeling like blocks of ice attached to his wrists. Even his thoughts were slowing down, getting sluggish and confused. This wasn't normal. This couldn't be normal. No climate changed this drastically, this quickly, without magic being involved. "It's freezing!" Benny yelled into the darkness, his voice cracking. "What kind of insane world has summer temperatures during the day and winter at night? This is..." He stopped mid-rant, a horrible thought occurring to him. What if he'd chosen wrong? What if this road led north toward some frozen wasteland? What if he was walking directly into increasingly deadly cold? What if he froze to death on his second day of being alive again? "No," he said firmly, though his voice shook. "No, I did not survive choking on a donut and getting reincarnated in a fantasy world just to freeze to death on a random road. That's not how this works. The protagonist doesn't die in Chapter 1, but the cold didn't care about narrative structure. It pressed in from all sides, relentless and pitiless, and Benny Bobo kept walking because he didn't know what else to do. The Chaos Sorcerer Benny Bobo Chapter 2, the worst possible phrasing. The cold had become unbearable. Benny's entire body shook with violent shivers that threatened to rattle his teeth loose. His thoughts were growing fuzzy, scattered, dangerous. He needed warmth. He needed it now. In his desperation, his mind grasped for a solution, any solution. The magic. He could use the magic. He just needed to ask for warmth. "Could you warm me up?" Benny said through chattering teeth. "As if I'm on fire." The words left his mouth and hung in the frigid air for exactly half a second before Benny's brain caught up with what he'd just said. Wait, no. Whoosh! Flames erupted across his body. Not metaphorical flames. Not gentle warming flames. Actual, literal, "Oh God, everything is burning fire!" Ah! Benny screamed, spinning in circles and flailing his arms like some kind of demented windmill. The cloak he'd summoned ignited first, going up like it had been soaked in gasoline. The robe followed immediately after, flames racing up the fabric with gleeful enthusiasm. His wizard hat, his poor, innocent wizard hat that had done nothing wrong, became a cone of fire perched atop his head. He ripped the hat off and threw it. It tumbled through the air like a flaming comet and landed in the grass beside the road, where it continued to burn merrily. The cloak came off next, Benny tearing at the clasp with fingers that felt the heat, but mercifully didn't seem to be actually burning. He flung it away and immediately started on the robe, yanking it over his head. For exactly 3 glorious seconds, Benny felt warm. Wonderfully, perfectly warm. The kind of warmth you feel when you step into a hot shower after being out in the snow. The flames licked across his skin without burning him, just providing pure, blessed heat. Then the magic decided it was done. The flames vanished as suddenly as they'd appeared. The robe, cloak, and hat disintegrated into ash that scattered on the wind. And Benny was left standing in the middle of a long, stretched dirt road, wearing nothing but his sandals and his tighty-whities. The cold rushed back in like it had been waiting for this exact moment. "Oh no," Benny whispered. "Oh no, no, no!" He looked down at himself. Sandals, white underwear, nothing else. The temperature had to be below freezing at this point, and he was essentially naked. "This is worse," he shouted at the uncaring universe. "This is so much worse. I was cold before, but at least I had clothes." He jumped up and down, rubbing his arms frantically, trying to generate any heat whatsoever. It didn't work. The cold bit into his exposed skin like thousands of tiny knives. His chest, his arms, his legs. Everything was exposed to the elements. "Could I have—" He started, but before he could finish the request, he felt a strange tingling sensation. He looked down just in time to see his sandals beginning to shimmer. "No, no, don't you dare!" The sandals dissolved into tiny points of light like fireflies or pixie dust and drifted away on the wind. "Are you kidding me?" Benny howled, now standing barefoot on the freezing dirt road. He spun around looking for his walking stick, thinking maybe he could at least use it too. The walking stick was doing the same thing. Light particles were peeling away from it, floating into the darkness like magical dandruff. Within seconds, it was gone completely. "The magical items don't last?" Benny's voice had gone shrill with panic and rage. "They just disappear? What kind of garbage magic system is this?" He was hopping from foot to foot now, the ground so cold it burned. His body had moved beyond shivering into something that felt like convulsing. His lips had to be blue. His fingers were so numb he couldn't feel them anymore. This was it. This was how Benny Bobo died. Again. Frozen to death while wearing nothing but underwear on a dirt road in a fantasy world, approximately 24 hours after choking to death on a donut. "I hate everything," he announced to the night sky. "I hate this world. I hate this magic. I hate donuts. I hate—" A sound cut through his rambling. A creaking, rattling sound. Wheels. Wheels on a road. Benny's head whipped toward the source. There, cresting the hill ahead of him, outlined against the star-filled sky, was a wagon. An actual, honest-to-God covered wagon, pulled by what looked like 2 large horses or maybe oxen. It was hard to tell in the darkness. "Help!" Benny screamed, waving his arms over his head. "Help, please!" The wagon slowed, then stopped. A figure stood up on the driver's bench, a large man, broad-shouldered, silhouetted against the stars. "What in the—" The man's voice was deep and confused. "Is that— Sir? Sir, are you okay?" The man climbed down from the wagon and approached cautiously, holding up a lantern. The light fell across Benny's nearly naked, shivering form, and the man's eyes went wide. "Saints preserve us! Sir, are you okay? Did you get robbed?" "Freezing," Benny managed through chattering teeth. "So cold. Janice!" The man bellowed over his shoulder. Janice, get out here! Get some clothes quick! This poor soul's been robbed and left for dead! The back of the wagon rustled, and a woman appeared. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a bun. She took one look at Benny and gasped. "Oh, you poor dear!" She disappeared back into the wagon and emerged seconds later with a thick woolen blanket. She rushed over and wrapped it around Benny's shoulders, rubbing his arms briskly through the fabric. "Marcus, help me get him in the wagon. He's frozen solid!" Marcus, the large man, scooped Benny up like he weighed nothing and carried him to the back of the wagon. Inside was warmer, sheltered from the wind, with supplies and goods piled along the sides. Janice had already laid out more blankets on the wooden floor. Marcus set Benny down gently, and Janice immediately began piling blankets on top of him until he looked like a cocoon of wool. "What are you doing out here?" Marcus asked, his face creased with concern. "In the middle of the night, in nothing but... Is that underwear?" "Freezing to death, apparently," Benny said, his teeth still chattering, but the violent shivering starting to subside under the weight of the blankets. "Apparently so," Marcus agreed. He shared a look with Janice. "My name is Marcus. This is my wife, Janice. We're heading home to Mundell. You're more than welcome to come with us. Can't leave you out here to freeze. Janice, get him some of my clothes." Marcus continued. "We can't have this poor guy out here like this." Janice nodded and started rummaging through a chest in the corner of the wagon. She pulled out a thick wool shirt, sturdy canvas pants, heavy socks, and after a moment's more searching, a pair of leather boots. "Here," she said gently, handing the clothes to Benny. "Put these on, and take off those... sandals?" She looked down. "Oh, you don't have sandals anymore." "They disappeared," Benny muttered, already pulling on the socks. The wool was thick and warm and absolutely glorious against his frozen feet. Magic clothes don't last, apparently. He pulled on the pants, going commando since his underwear was all he had left from his summoned outfit, and then the shirt. Both were too big for him, Marcus being a much larger man, but Benny didn't care. They were warm. They were real. They existed. The boots came next, and here something strange happened. As Benny slid his feet into them, the leather seemed to shift, adjust. Within seconds, the boots fit him perfectly, like they'd been cobbled specifically for his feet. "Did these just resize themselves?" Benny asked, wiggling his toes. "Aye, they're enchanted," Marcus said with a nod. "Had 'em made special by a craftsman in Thornhaven. Cost me a pretty copper, but worth every bit. They'll fit anyone who wears 'em, aye, and they never wear out." "Real enchantments," Benny said softly. "Not summoned magic. These will last." "Summoned magic?" Janice asked, handing him a thick coat. "You're a magic user?" Benny pulled on the coat, nearly weeping at the warmth. "I? Yes, maybe? I'm still figuring it out. I tried to warm myself up with fire magic, and it kind of burned my clothes away." Marcus and Janice exchanged another look, this one more knowing. "Were they magical clothes?" Janice asked. "Summoned items?" "I asked the universe for clothes," Benny explained, "and it gave me a robe, a hat, my underwear, and sandals." Even as he mentioned the sandals, he looked down. Through the fabric of his pants, he could see a faint glow. Little points of light were seeping out from the pant legs, drifting up like fireflies. "Oh no," he said. The others saw it too. They watched as dozens of tiny light particles emerged from Benny's clothing, or rather, from where his summoned underwear had been underneath the real pants. "Your undergarments were summoned too," Janice said. It wasn't a question. The lights finished their escape and drifted away into nothing. Benny felt the distinct absence of fabric against his skin. "And now they're gone," he confirmed flatly. "Now I'm going completely commando in borrowed pants. This is my life now." "Oh, you poor dear," Janice said, though there was amusement in her eyes. "You really don't know much about summoning magic, do you?" "I didn't even know I had magic until today," Benny admitted. "Yesterday? I don't know what time it is. I'm from..." He paused. How did he explain this? "Very far away. I woke up in a field with nothing, and I've been figuring things out as I go." "Well, here's something to figure out," Marcus said, settling himself on a crate and gesturing for Benny to sit as well. "Summoned items, clothes, objects, anything you conjure from nothing. They're not real, not permanent. They're made of concentrated magical energy, and that energy disperses over time. Hours, usually, sometimes minutes if the item is complex." And they can't keep you warm, Janice added. Oh, they look like they should, and they feel like they might. But magical cloth has no real substance. You might as well be wearing air. That's why you were freezing to death even with a robe and cloak. But these clothes, Benny said, plucking at the shirt he wore, these are real, made by hands, not magic. Exactly, Marcus confirmed. Real cloth, real thread, real warmth. Enchanted items are different. They're real items that had magic added to them, like my boots. Those last, but pure conjuration? That fades. That would have been really useful information a few hours ago, Benny said, pulling the coat tighter around himself. Marcus chuckled. I imagine it would have been. Well, you know now. Come on. Get comfortable. We've got a long ride ahead of us. We'll reach Mundell by morning if we keep a good pace. The wagon began to move, Marcus having climbed back up to the driver's bench. Janice stayed in the back with Benny, arranging the blankets into something approximating a bed. Rest if you can, she said kindly. You've had quite the night. Benny lay back on the blankets, wrapped in real clothes and real warmth for the first time since arriving in this world. The wagon rocked gently as it rolled along the road. Above, through the open back, he could see the stars wheeling slowly across the sky. Thank you, he said quietly. Both of you. You saved my life. Think nothing of it, Janice replied. We help those in need. That's just what decent folk do. Benny wanted to ask more questions about Mundell, about this world, about how money worked and what kind of society existed here. But exhaustion crashed over him like a wave. The warmth, the gentle rocking of the wagon, the security of being with people who weren't trying to kill him or let him freeze to death. It was too much. His eyes drifted closed. He slept. Benny woke to golden sunlight streaming through the back of the wagon and the sound of city noise, voices, wheels on cobblestones, the general hubbub of human activity. He sat up, disoriented for a moment, then remembered. The road, the cold. Marcus and Janice. Real clothes. He was still wearing the borrowed outfit, he noted with relief. No magical disappearing act this time. Ah, you're awake! Marcus's voice called from the front. Good timing. We're just coming up on Mundell now. Benny crawled to the back of the wagon and looked out. His breath caught. Mundell was a proper city. Not huge, maybe the size of a large town by Earth standards, but definitely civilization. Stone walls surrounded it, maybe 20 feet high, with guard towers at intervals. The gates were open, and people streamed in and out, merchants with carts, farmers with produce, travelers on foot and on horseback. The buildings beyond the gates were a mix of stone and timber, 2 and 3 stories tall, with slate or thatched roofs. Smoke rose from countless chimneys. Signs hung above doorways advertising inns, taverns, shops, and services. It looked like something out of a medieval fantasy movie, except it was real and alive and bustling with actual people going about their actual lives. It's amazing, Benny breathed. The wagon rolled through the gates after a brief inspection by the guards. Marcus seemed to be known and liked, just waving as they passed. The streets of Mundell were narrow and winding, paved with cobblestones that made the wagon rattle even more than the dirt road had. Marcus guided the wagon to a stop near what looked like a market square. He climbed down and came around to the back where Benny was already getting out. Here, Marcus said, pulling a small leather pouch from his belt. He pressed it into Benny's hand. There's about 10 rennas in there. Should be enough to get you a room at the local inn and a few meals. Benny looked down at the pouch, feeling the weight of the coins inside. Rennas. That's the money here? Aye, copper wrens, silver marks, gold crowns, 10 copper to a silver, 10 silver to a gold. Those are coppers in there. Marcus smiled. It's not much, but it'll get you started. I'd suggest finding work. Become an adventurer or a trader or apprentice to a craftsman. Someone with magic talent like yours, even untrained, the Adventurers Guild would probably take you on. The Adventurers Guild, Benny repeated. Is that, like, a real thing here? People actually register as adventurers? Of course, Janice said, having joined them. How else would you take on quests and bounties? The guild handles all of that. They're on the main street. Can't miss it. Big building with a sword and shield hanging over the door. Benny clutched the pouch of coins. I'll pay you back, I promise. As soon as I can. Marcus held up a hand. Don't worry about it. Just help the next person you find in trouble the way we helped you. That's payment enough. I will, Benny said and meant it. Thank you. Both of you. I mean it. They said their goodbyes, Janice giving Benny a motherly hug that made his chest ache with unexpected emotion. Then Marcus and Janice climbed back onto their wagon and headed off down a side street, presumably toward their home. Benny stood in the market square of Mundell, a city in a fantasy world, wearing borrowed clothes and holding 10 copper rene with absolutely no idea what he was doing. Adventurers Guild, he said to himself. Okay, I can do that. Go to the guild, sign up, figure things out from there. Easy, simple, totally not terrifying. He asked a passing merchant for directions. The man pointed him down the main street and told him to look for the sword and shield. Benny thanked him and set off, weaving through the morning crowds. The city was fascinating. Every building seemed to serve a purpose. Bakeries with fresh bread in the windows, smithies with the ring of hammers on anvils, apothecaries with dried herbs hanging in bundles. People wore simple but sturdy clothing, mostly earth tones, with the occasional splash of color from someone wealthier. No one looked twice at Benny, which was a relief. He'd half expected to stand out as obviously foreign, but apparently a scrawny teenager in oversized clothes wasn't unusual here. He found the Adventurers Guild easily enough. It was indeed a large building, 3 stories of solid stone construction with a painted sign depicting a crossed sword and shield hanging above the entrance. Through the windows, he could see people moving around inside. Benny took a deep breath. Here we go. New life, new start, new career? As an adventurer, sure. Why not? I died choking on a donut, got reincarnated with weird magic powers, and now I'm going to register at an Adventurers Guild. This is fine. This is totally normal. He pushed open the door and stepped inside. The interior was busy. The main room was large, with high ceilings supported by thick wooden beams. Tables and benches filled the space, occupied by people of all descriptions, burly men and women in armor, lithe figures in leather, robed magic users, and everything in between. A long bar ran along one wall, serving drinks. A notice board covered another wall, plastered with papers that Benny assumed were quests or jobs. At the far end was a counter with several people behind it, handling what looked like registration and administrative work. Every conversation in the room seemed to stop at once. Everyone turned to look at Benny. He froze in the doorway, suddenly acutely aware that he looked like he was about 15 years old, even though he was actually 27, or had been, or time was confusing. Wearing clothes several sizes too large, with no weapons, no armor, and no idea what he was doing. Well, well, someone said from one of the tables, a grizzled man with scars on his face and arms like tree trunks. What do we have here? Looks like a lost kid, another voice added, female this time, followed by laughter. Benny's face burned, but he forced himself to walk forward, toward the registration counter. He could feel eyes on him from every direction. Ah, look at the scrawny little runt, someone called out. He wants to be an adventurer. More laughter. That's rich, another voice agreed. What are you going to do, kid? Slay dragons with your mighty... What, you don't even have a weapon. Maybe he'll bore the monsters to death, or trip over his own feet and accidentally fall on them. The mockery washed over Benny as he reached the counter. Behind it sat a woman with sharp eyes and sharper features, her silver hair pulled back severely. She looked him up and down with an expression that gave away nothing. Help you, she asked, her voice clipped and professional. Benny swallowed hard. He could still hear the laughter and comments behind him, but he forced himself to ignore them. I'd like to register, he said, trying to keep his voice steady, as an adventurer. The woman's eyebrow rose fractionally. You want to register, as an adventurer? Yes, ma'am. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled out a large ledger and opened it to a blank page. Name? Benny hesitated for just a second. Benny Bobo. If she thought the name was strange, she didn't show it. She wrote it down in neat script. Age? Benny paused. How old was he? He'd been 27, but in this body? I don't know. The woman looked up from the ledger. You don't know how old you are. It's complicated. She stared at him. Benny stared back, trying to project confidence he absolutely didn't feel. Finally, she sighed and looked him over again. You look about 15. I'll put down 15. That works. Class or specialty? I can do magic, summoning, I think. Maybe other things. I'm still figuring it out. Magic user, unspecified. She wrote it down. Any combat training? No. Any adventuring experience? No. Any relevant skills whatsoever? Benny thought about his life as Sam Winters. I'm really good at inventory management. The woman's expression suggested this was not the answer she'd been hoping for. Behind him, someone shouted, "He's gonna manage the monster's inventory. Watch out, dragons, he'll reorganize your hordes." The whole room erupted in laughter. The Chaos Sorcerer, Benny Bobo, Chapter 3, The Guild's New Laughingstock. Benny's face burned with embarrassment as the laughter echoed through the guild hall. He could feel every eye on him, every smirk, every barely contained snicker. His hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I can prove myself," he said, louder than he'd intended. His voice cracked slightly, which didn't help. "I'm not just some kid. I have magic, real magic. I can..." He took a step forward to demonstrate. He wasn't sure what exactly, maybe summon something impressive, when his foot caught on something. A broom. Someone had left a broom leaning against the counter, and Benny's oversized boot hooked right under the handle. Time seemed to slow down in that special way it does when disaster is inevitable. Benny felt himself falling forward, his arms windmilling for balance. The broom clattered, tipped, and began to fall as well. Benny's hands shot out instinctively to catch himself. They missed the counter entirely. Instead, his forward momentum carried him directly onto the falling broom handle, which positioned itself with supernatural precision directly between his legs. The impact was immediate, profound, and absolutely catastrophic. Benny's voice went up approximately 3 octaves as every nerve ending in his lower body screamed in unified agony. His eyes bulged. His face went from red with embarrassment to white with pain in an instant. He tried to catch himself, to recover, to do literally anything other than what happened next. His legs crossed involuntarily. A desperate, instinctive attempt by his body to protect what had already been grievously injured. This caused him to lose what little balance he had left. Benny toppled backward, his legs still crossed, and as he fell, his heel came up and around in a perfect arc that could only be described as cosmically unfair. Wham! His own heel struck him directly in the groin. "Nuts!" Benny shrieked, his voice hitting notes he didn't know were humanly possible. He hit the ground on his back, both hands immediately clutching his devastated manhood, his knees drawn up to his chest. "My nuts! Oh God, my nuts!" The guild hall exploded. The laughter was immediate, overwhelming, and absolutely merciless. People were doubled over at their tables. Someone fell completely out of their chair. The grizzled warrior who'd called him a runt was pounding the table so hard his ale sloshed everywhere, tears streaming down his scarred face. Even the woman behind the counter, the stern, professional woman who'd shown no emotion whatsoever, had her hand clamped over her mouth, her shoulders shaking with barely suppressed laughter. Benny rolled on the floor, still clutching himself, making small whimpering sounds that only seemed to make the laughter worse. "I can't," someone gasped between guffaws. "I can't breathe. The broom." "He hit himself twice," another voice cried, "with his own heel." "Best thing I've seen all month." Benny tried to get up. His body was not cooperating. The pain radiating from his groin suggested that standing was perhaps not a good idea for the foreseeable future, but his pride demanded he at least try. He rolled onto his hands and knees, still seeing stars, still making small wounded sounds. That's when he saw it. One of his copper coins had fallen out of the pouch Marcus had given him. It lay on the floor directly in front of him, glinting in the morning light streaming through the windows. My coin," Benny wheezed, reaching for it. His hand closed around the copper piece. He tried to stand, putting his weight on his feet. The coin was still on the floor under his boot. Copper on stone, perfectly smooth, perfectly slippery. "Oh no," Benny managed to say. His foot shot out from under him like he'd stepped on ice. His legs went in 2 different directions. He did an involuntary split that would have been impressive if it hadn't been absolutely terrible. And as he fell, because of course he fell, his forward momentum carried him directly toward the nearest table. The table leg caught him right between the legs. Again. "My balls!" Benny screamed, his voice somehow even higher and more agonized than before. "My balls! My poor little balls!" If the laughter before had been loud, this was apocalyptic. The entire guild was in hysterics. People were crying, actually crying with laughter. Someone was banging on a table so hard it sounded like a drum. Another person had fallen completely off their bench and was rolling on the floor. His little balls, someone howled. He said his little balls. Kid's got a third one by now, another voice added. The floor. Someone stop him before he kills himself. Benny slumped against the table leg, both hands once again protecting his thoroughly abused anatomy, his face pressed against the cool stone floor. Tears leaked from the corners of his eyes. Whether from pain, humiliation, or both, he couldn't tell. The woman behind the counter had given up all pretense of professionalism. She was laughing openly now, wiping tears from her eyes with one hand while trying to maintain some composure. Okay, she finally managed, her voice still shaking with suppressed mirth. Okay, kid, you can be an adventurer. Benny looked up from his position on the floor, his vision still slightly blurry. What? You heard me. She was grinning now, something that transformed her severe features into something almost pleasant. You're going to bring a lot of fun to this guild. We could use the entertainment. You're registered. Welcome to the Adventurers Guild, Benny Bobo. A cheer went up from the crowd, though it was still mixed with laughter. Benny tried to stand again, carefully this time, making absolutely sure there were no coins, brooms, or other instruments of testicular destruction in his immediate vicinity. He made it to his feet, wobbling slightly, his legs not entirely trustworthy. Thank you, he said to the woman, his voice hoarse. I thank you. He took a step toward the counter to finish the registration process. His boot came down on the copper coin again. No. Benny had exactly enough time to recognize his mistake before his feet went out from under him again. This time he went straight backward, his arms flailing uselessly. His head connected with the edge of a table with a solid crack that echoed through the hall. My head! Benny shouted. Now sprawled on his back once more, one hand on his groin and one hand on his head. My head! Ow, ow! My head! At least it's not your balls. Someone called out gleefully. The guild absolutely lost it. The laughter was so loud now it had to be audible from outside. People were gasping for air. Someone was literally crying so hard they couldn't speak. The woman behind the counter had given up entirely and was leaning against the wall, her whole body shaking. Benny lay on the floor, contemplating every decision that had led him to this moment. Death by donut, reincarnation, magic powers, and now this, becoming the official laughingstock of the Adventurers Guild within 5 minutes of walking through the door. I hate everything, he announced to the ceiling. I hate this world. I hate magic. I hate brooms. I hate coins. I especially hate my balls, because apparently they're just targets now. This triggered another wave of laughter. Eventually, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, the laughter began to die down. People wiped their eyes, caught their breath, and went back to their drinks and conversations, though they kept glancing at Benny and breaking into fresh snickers. The woman behind the counter finally composed herself enough to help Benny to his feet. She guided him to the counter, steering him carefully around the cursed copper coin that still lay on the floor. Let's finish your registration, she said, still smiling. Before you manage to hurt yourself again. My name's Vera, by the way. I'm one of the guild administrators. Benny Bobo, Benny said miserably. But you already know that. Everyone's going to know that now. Oh, absolutely, Vera agreed cheerfully. You're going to be famous by sundown. The kid who hit himself in the balls 3 times during registration. It's going into guild legend. Great. Wonderful. That's exactly what I wanted. Vera finished writing in the ledger, then pulled out a small card made of what looked like wood or heavy parchment. She wrote his name on it, along with some symbols that Benny didn't recognize. This is your guild card, she explained. It proves you're a registered adventurer. Don't lose it. It also tracks your rank. You're starting at F rank, which is the bottom. Do quests, complete jobs, and you'll rank up. Higher ranks get access to better quests and better pay. She slid the card across to him, along with a small bronze token. This is your room token. The guild provides housing for members. Nothing fancy, but it's free. 3rd floor, room 17. You'll also get 3 meals a day at the guild mess hall. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Benny perked up slightly. Free room and board? For the first 300 days, yes. After that, you'll need to pay rent like everyone else, or earn enough to get your own place. The meals are basic, but they'll keep you alive. Vera's smile turned slightly sympathetic. Fair warning, though, the food here is, well, you'll see. If you want something actually filling or tasty, you'll need to go into town and spend real money at the inns or taverns." "How basic are we talking?" Benny asked warily. "Breakfast is porridge. Lunch is a sandwich. Bread, cheese, more bread. Dinner is usually potato soup." Vera shrugged. "Like I said, it'll keep you alive, but don't expect flavor or satisfaction." Benny looked down at his guild card and room token, free housing and food for 300 days. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than freezing to death on a road or starving in an alley. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Really, I know what just happened was ridiculous, but thank you for registering me anyway." Vera's expression softened. "Everyone starts somewhere, kid. Some starts are just more memorable than others. Now get out of here before you trip over something else. Your room's upstairs, 3rd floor. Can't miss it. The numbers are on the doors." Benny nodded and turned to leave, walking very carefully, watching the floor like it might attack him at any moment. "Hey, kid," someone called out as he passed. "Watch out for those vicious floor coins." Laughter erupted again, but it was less malicious now. More fond? Like they'd accepted him as part of the guild entertainment. Benny just waved without turning around and headed for the stairs. Room 17 was small but serviceable. A narrow bed with a thin mattress, a small table with a single chair, a chest for belongings, which Benny didn't have, and a window that looked out over the city. The room smelled faintly of old wood and dust, but it was clean enough. Benny sat on the bed and put his head in his hands. "This is my life now," he said to the empty room. "I'm the guild joke, the kid who hurt himself in the balls 3 times in 5 minutes. That's my legacy in this world." His groin still ached, a dull throb that suggested he was going to be feeling this for days. His head throbbed where he'd hit it on the table. His pride was completely shattered. But he had a room. He had food, even if it was apparently terrible. He had a guild card and a chance to actually make something of himself in this world. "Could be worse," he muttered. "Could have frozen to death last night. Could have starved, could have been eaten by whatever monsters exist in this world." He lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. His stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since the flavorless, magical oatmeal substance the previous night. According to the position of the sun through the window, it was probably close to midday. Lunchtime. Time to see just how bad the guild food really was. The mess hall was on the 1st floor, through a door at the back of the main hall. It was a long room with several tables and benches, currently occupied by about a dozen adventurers in various states of eating and conversation. All conversation stopped when Benny walked in. "It's the ball buster," someone announced cheerfully. 3-hit wonder. "Hey kid, watch out for the benches. They might attack your nuts." Benny's face burned, but he forced himself to walk to the serving counter where an older woman with flour on her apron was doling out food. "You must be the new one," she said, not unkindly. "Heard about your registration." "I'm sure everyone did," Benny muttered. She handed him a plate with what could only generously be called a sandwich. 2 pieces of bread, stale by the look of them, with a thin slice of cheese between them. That was it. No butter, no meat, no vegetables. Just bread and cheese. "Thanks," Benny said, taking the plate. He found an empty spot at one of the tables and sat down, trying to ignore the still snickering adventurers around him. He picked up the sandwich and took a bite. It was exactly as bad as it looked. The bread was tough and flavorless. The cheese was bland and slightly rubbery. Together they formed a combination that was technically food but offered no joy whatsoever. Benny chewed mechanically, forcing himself to swallow. His stomach accepted the offering but seemed disappointed by it. This was lunch. This was what he had to look forward to every day unless he wanted to spend his limited money on better food in town. He looked at the 10 copper rennas Marcus had given him. How much did actual food cost? How long would 10 coppers last him? These were questions he needed answers to, but for now, he finished his terrible sandwich in silence while the other adventurers gradually lost interest in him and went back to their own conversations. Dinner was somehow worse. Benny returned to the mess hall that evening, his stomach growling again despite the disappointing lunch. The same woman was at the counter, but this time she was ladling something from a large pot into wooden bowls. "Potato soup," she announced as she handed Benny his portion. He looked down at it. The soup was a thin grayish liquid with a few chunks of what might have been potato floating in it. It smelled like nothing. Literally nothing. Like someone had boiled water and potatoes together and forgotten to add salt or seasoning of any kind. Benny sat at a table and tried a spoonful. It tasted like hot water with the memory of potatoes. The chunks had the texture of wet cardboard. There was no salt, no pepper, no herbs, no flavor whatsoever. It was like eating the concept of food rather than actual food. "Oh God," Benny whispered after forcing down a second spoonful. "This is what I get for free. This is my life now." He understood immediately why Vera had warned him about the food. This wasn't cooking. This was the bare minimum required to technically qualify as a meal. It would keep him from starving, but it would be a joyless, flavorless existence. Around him, other adventurers were eating the same soup with expressions ranging from resigned acceptance to active misery. A few had brought their own bread or seasonings to make it more palatable. Benny forced himself to finish the bowl. Wasting food seemed wrong, even terrible food, and then returned to his room, his stomach full but unsatisfied. He lay on his narrow bed and stared at the ceiling again. "Tomorrow," he said to himself, "I need to figure out how to make money. Real money. Because I cannot live on bland porridge, disappointing sandwiches, and potato water soup for 300 days. I'll lose my mind." His groin still ached faintly, a reminder of his spectacular introduction to the guild. His pride was bruised, his stomach was disappointed, but he was alive, he had shelter, he had a chance. "New day tomorrow," Benny told the ceiling, "new opportunities. Maybe I'll actually manage to not injure myself, maybe I'll figure out this magic system properly, maybe I'll find a quest that doesn't involve brooms or coins or any other objects of testicular destruction." Outside his window, the city of Mundell settled into evening. Voices drifted up from the streets. Somewhere, someone was playing music. Life was happening all around him, and for the first time since waking up naked in a field, Benny felt like he might actually be part of it, even if he was the part everyone laughed at. He closed his eyes and, despite the uncomfortable bed and the general chaos of his new existence, fell asleep almost immediately. Tomorrow would be his first real day as an adventurer, assuming he survived it without any more catastrophic injuries to his anatomy. The Chaos Sorcerer Benny Bobo Chapter 4, The Tiny Bunny and the Great Bowel Catastrophe. Benny woke to sunlight streaming through his window and the sound of the guild already bustling with activity below. His stomach growled immediately, reminding him that breakfast awaited. Bland, flavorless porridge that would sustain him without bringing any joy whatsoever. "New day," he muttered, swinging his legs out of bed. "Time to actually do something productive, like a quest. A real adventure quest." After choking down a bowl of porridge that tasted like wet paste with the consistency of library paste, Benny made his way to the quest board. Several adventurers were already there, scanning the posted jobs. They parted slightly when he approached, a few snickering. "Watch out, the board might attack his balls," someone whispered, triggering a ripple of laughter. Benny ignored them and scanned the available quests. Most were clearly beyond his capabilities. Slay the dire wolf pack, rank C. Clear the goblin den, rank D. Escort merchant caravan, rank C. Then he saw it, pinned near the bottom. Collect fluffy tail fibers, rank F. Reward, 2 silver wrens, 14 copper wrens. That was the one, his rank, perfectly suited for someone who'd only been an adventurer for approximately 16 hours. He took the posting to the counter where Vera was working. "Ah, starting small. Smart," she said, taking the paper. "Let me show you what you're looking for." She pulled out a leather-bound book and flipped through it until she found a page with an illustration. She turned it to face Benny. "These are tiny bunnies," Vera explained, pointing at the drawing. "You'll find them in the fields about half a mile outside the east gate. They're completely harmless. Just walk up to one, collect some of the fluff from its tail. It comes off easily. Put it in a bag and bring it back here. Simple first quest." Benny studied the illustration. The bunny looked, well, like a normal bunny. Cute, fluffy, with particularly fluffy tail. "Do I have to kill it?" No, Vera assured him. "You just walk up to the bunny, collect some fluff from its tail, put it in a bag, and come back. That's it. They're very docile creatures. Won't even run away from you." "Oh, cool. This should be easy then." Vera handed him a small cloth sack and a basic knife. the sack for the fluff, the knife in case you need to cut any tangles free. Good luck, and try not to injure yourself on the way. The laughter from nearby adventurers suggested they all remembered his registration spectacle vividly. Benny took the supplies, squared his shoulders, and headed out. The walk through Mundell was pleasant in the morning light. Merchants were opening their shops, the smell of fresh bread wafted from bakeries, and people went about their business with the comfortable rhythm of daily life. Benny passed through the east gate with a nod to the guards and followed the dirt path that led into the rolling countryside. The fields were beautiful, golden grass swaying in the gentle breeze, wildflowers adding splashes of color, birds singing in the scattered trees. After about half a mile, the path curved around a small grove of trees. Benny pushed through some brush and emerged into a clearing, and froze. There, standing in the middle of the clearing like some kind of furry mountain, was what could only be described as the least tiny thing Benny had ever seen. The bunny was massive. It stood easily 60 feet tall and about 30 feet wide, with fur that looked soft enough to sink into up to your knees. Its ears were like small towers, twitching occasionally. Its eyes were the size of wagon wheels, dark and liquid and completely harmless looking, despite being housed in a creature that could probably accidentally step on a house. And its tail, oh God, its tail was the size of an actual mountain, a fluffy white mass of fur that could probably be seen from the city walls. "That's a tiny bunny?" Benny screamed at the universe. "That's what they call tiny in this world?" The bunny's ear twitched at the sound of his voice. It looked down at him with those massive, gentle eyes and made a soft sound. "Mzerp?" Benny stood there, his heart hammering, staring up at the creature. It wasn't threatening. It didn't look aggressive at all. In fact, it looked exactly as docile as Vera had promised. Just enormous. Cosmically, impossibly enormous. "Okay," Benny said to himself, trying to calm down. "Okay, it's fine. It's just big, very, very big, but harmless. I can do this. Just walk up to it, collect some fluff. Don't think about how it could accidentally kill me by sitting down wrong." He approached slowly, the knife and sack clutched in his hands. The tiny bunny watched him with mild curiosity but didn't move. When Benny got close to the mountain-sized tail, he reached up and grabbed a handful of the impossibly soft fur. It came away easily, just like Vera had said. Tufts of white fluff, so soft it was almost like holding a cloud. He stuffed it into the sack, then grabbed more and more until the bag was comfortably full. "See," he told himself. "Easy, simple, no ball-related injuries whatsoever." The bunny made another soft msop sound and hopped once, a gentle hop that probably registered as a small earthquake somewhere, before settling down again. Benny backed away carefully, not wanting to startle the creature, and headed back toward the path. That's when he noticed them. Small plants growing near the base of a tree with tiny berries that looked oddly familiar. He knelt down and examined them more closely. The berries were dark, wrinkled, and when he carefully plucked one and smelled it, "Pepper!" Benny's eyes widened. "This smells exactly like pepper!" He looked around and spotted more of the plants. Carefully, he harvested several of the peppercorn-like berries, his mind already racing. The soup last night had been so bland, so flavorless. If he could add actual seasoning, then he spotted something else. A rock formation near another tree, whitish gray stone that looked oddly crystalline. Benny picked up a small piece and, after a moment's hesitation, touched his tongue to it. Salt. It tasted like salt. Not quite the same as table salt from Earth, but definitely salty. "Oh my God," Benny breathed. "This is salt. I found salt and pepper. I can make the food actually taste good." He pulled out his knife and carefully chipped off several chunks of the salt rock, collecting them in his hand. Then he sat down right there and used the flat of the blade to grind up some of the salt into a powder, which he poured into a separate cloth he'd had in his pocket. He did the same with the peppercorns, crushing them into a coarse powder. 2 small sacks now, one with the tiny bunny fluff, one with his makeshift salt, and one with his pepper substitute. Benny grinned. This was going to make him a hero at the guild. Actual seasoning! The meals would finally have flavor! The walk back to Mundell took about 20 minutes. Benny went straight to the guild and presented the bag of fluff to Vera. She examined it, nodded approvingly, and counted out his payment. 2 silver wrens and 14 copper wrens. The coins clinked into his palm, and Benny marveled at the weight of them. Real money. Money he'd earned himself. "Well done," Vera said. "Your first completed quest. How was it?" "The tiny bunny was 60 feet tall," Benny said flatly. "Yes, they're quite large for tiny bunnies. That doesn't make any sense." "Welcome to the world, kid." Vera made a mark in her ledger. "You're free to take another quest if you want, but it's getting late in the day. You might want to stick to in-town quests for now." Benny scanned the board again and found one that was perfect. "Deliver letter to Dave. 1 silver renna, 4 copper wrens." A delivery quest. In town. How hard could that be? He took the posting to Vera, who handed him a sealed letter. "Dave's shop is on Silver Street, near the market square. Just give him this. Get his stamp confirming delivery and bring the letter back. Simple enough." "This is going to be hard, isn't it?" Benny asked suspiciously. "It's literally just walking and handing someone a letter." "Yeah, that's what worries me." Finding Dave's shop was easy enough. It was a small bookbinding business with a hand-painted sign showing books and scrolls. Benny pushed open the door, making a small bell chime. "Hello?" he called. A man emerged from the back, middle-aged, balding, with ink-stained fingers and a distracted expression. "Yes! What can I do for you?" "Letter from the Adventurers Guild," Benny said, holding it out. "Ah, yes, I've been expecting that." Dave took the letter, broke the seal, and read it quickly. Then he nodded and reached for a stamp on his desk. "Just need to confirm receipt." He stamped the letter. Or rather, he tried to stamp the letter. What actually happened was Dave somehow completely missed the letter that Benny was holding and stamped Benny directly on the forehead. "Oh!" Benny yelped, jerking back. "Oh! Oh dear!" Dave looked horrified. "I'm so sorry, I wasn't looking. My eyes aren't what they used to be." Benny touched his forehead and his fingers came away with ink. He could feel the raised impression of the stamp. Received Dave's bindery. He walked back to the guild with a stamp on his forehead, holding the unstamped letter, contemplating every life choice that had led to this moment. The guild erupted in laughter the moment he walked in. "He got stamped! On his forehead!" "That's amazing!" Vera took one look at him, at the stamp clearly visible on his forehead, at the unstamped letter, and her mouth twitched. "Well, that's unconventional." "Dave missed," Benny said miserably. "I can see that." Vera examined the stamp on his forehead, then looked at the letter. "Well, it's clearly a valid stamp from Dave's shop, even if it's not on the letter where it should be." She pulled out a strange crystal orb and pointed it at Benny. There was a flash of light. "What was?" Benny started. Vera showed him the crystal. Inside it was a perfect image of Benny holding the letter with Dave's stamp clearly visible on his forehead. "This'll have to do," she said, copying the image onto a piece of paper with what appeared to be magic. "Proof of delivery, even if it's technically proof of face stamping." She counted out 1 silver wren and 4 copper wrens. Good work. Unconventional, but good work. Benny took the money and added it to his growing collection of coins. He now had 3 silver wrens and 18 copper wrens. An actual fortune by his standards. The other adventurers were still laughing, but it was the good-natured kind of laughter. He was becoming the guild's entertainment, but at least they seemed to like him. By the time Benny got the forehead stamp mostly scrubbed off, it was very good ink, it was time for dinner. His stomach growled at the thought of potato soup, then immediately felt sad at what that actually meant. But he had a plan. He found the cook, a woman named Martha who always looked tired and slightly annoyed at having to feed dozens of adventurers on a minimal budget. "Excuse me," Benny said politely. "I found some salt and pepper today while I was out on my quest. Would it be okay if I made the soup taste better? Enhance the flavor?" Martha's eyes narrowed. "You don't like my cooking?" No, it's not your cooking," Benny said quickly. "It's just, I think it would enhance the flavor. Make it even better. Everyone would enjoy it more." Martha crossed her arms. "Well, if you think so, but you'll have to ask everyone else if they're okay with it. I'm not having people complain that you ruined dinner." Benny turned to the mess hall where adventurers were starting to gather for the evening meal. He raised his voice. "Hey, would everyone be okay if I enhanced the soup tonight? I found some salt and pepper." The room went quiet. Then someone called out, "You found salt and pepper?" "Yeah, real salt and pepper, or at least stuff that tastes like salt and pepper." And you want to put it in the soup? To make it taste better, yeah? There was a moment of consideration. Then someone said, I mean, it can't make it worse. Fair point. Sure, kid, go for it. Yeah, why not? I've got nothing to lose except another boring dinner. The consensus was unanimous. Anything was better than flavorless potato water. Martha sighed and stepped aside. Fine, the pot's all yours. Don't burn it. Benny grinned and pulled out his pouches of salt and pepper. He dumped the salt into the massive pot of soup, all of it, figuring more was better. Then the pepper, again, all of it. He stirred vigorously, making sure it was evenly distributed. Then he remembered how his mom used to make soup. She always let it simmer a bit longer after adding spices to let the flavors really develop. Benny adjusted the heat, keeping the soup at a gentle bubble and stirred it occasionally. After about 10 minutes, he tasted it. It was delicious. Or at least, compared to the usual offering, it was practically gourmet. The salt brought out the flavor of the potatoes. The pepper added a nice kick. It actually tasted like food. Okay, Benny announced proudly. It's ready. The adventurers lined up, and Martha began ladling out bowls. The first few people tasted it, and their eyes widened. This is actually good. Holy shit, it has flavor. Kid, you're a genius. I take back everything I said about you being useless. Benny beamed with pride as more and more people praised the soup. Everyone was going back for seconds and thirds. The whole pot was emptied within minutes, with people scraping their bowls to get every last drop. Best meal I've had at the guild in months, someone declared. Benny, you're a hero. Finally, food that doesn't taste like sadness. Benny went to bed that night feeling accomplished. He'd completed 2 quests, earned money, and made the guild dinner actually edible. Things were looking up. Benny woke at midnight to his stomach cramping violently. Oh, he groaned, curling into a ball. Oh no, oh no, no, no. His intestines felt like they were trying to tie themselves into knots. Pressure built rapidly, urgently, demanding immediate attention. He stumbled out of bed and rushed to the door, yanking it open, and found a line of at least 20 people already waiting for the single bathroom on the floor. No! Someone at the front of the line wailed. I can't wait that long! Move, another person screamed. Move or I'm going to. They didn't finish the sentence. They ran. Benny watched in horror as people started abandoning the line, rushing down the stairs and out the back door of the guild. Through his window, he could see adventurers in various states of undress running into the darkness behind the building, yanking down their pants, and, oh God! Someone screamed from outside. What's happening to me? My guts! What did you do? What did you do to us? More people ran past Benny's door. The bathroom line had completely dissolved. Everyone was either already in the bathroom, running outside, or Benny looked out the window again and immediately regretted it. Someone had their rear end stuck out of a second-floor window. The person in the room below was screaming, Not on me! I'm trying to shit here! Aim somewhere else! I can't control it! The window shitter wailed. This is a nightmare. Benny's own stomach cramped again, harder this time. He gritted his teeth, trying to hold it in, but the pressure was building to catastrophic levels. He spent the next several hours curled up on his bed, cramping and sweating, listening to the sounds of digestive distress echoing throughout the guild. People were crying, cursing, begging for mercy from whatever god controlled bowel movements. Finally, at around 4 a.m, Benny's turn came. The bathroom was blessedly empty, everyone else having either finished their ordeal or given up and gone outside. What happened in that bathroom would haunt Benny for the rest of his life. Morning came slowly, grimly, and with the smell of shame hanging over the entire guild. Benny stumbled down to the mess hall, his stomach empty and his dignity shattered. Other adventurers were there, looking pale and miserable, drinking water and avoiding eye contact with each other. Someone approached Benny, one of the older adventurers, a woman named Sarah who looked like she'd been through a war. What, she said quietly, dangerously, did you put in that soup? Benny pulled out the pouches, now empty, and showed them to her. Sarah took one sniff of the pepper pouch and her face went white. This is crapping powder. You put crapping powder in the soup? People use this when they're constipated and need to shit. What? Benny looked at the other pouch. What about the salt? Another adventurer took it and tasted a tiny bit that was left. His expression turned to horror. Constipation salt. It's the opposite. It blocks you up. You put both in the soup? I didn't know, Benny protested. I thought they were just salt and pepper. Where did you even find these? By the tiny bunny field, there were plants and rocks that tasted like... The tiny bunny field is where medicinal herbs grow, Sarah shouted. Everyone knows that. You're supposed to identify them before using them. The guild was silent for a moment as this information sank in. Then the laughter started. Not from the people who'd eaten the soup. They were still too traumatized, but from the few adventurers who'd been out on multi-day quests and had missed dinner entirely. They'd woken up to the chaos, heard the stories, and were now absolutely losing it. He poisoned everyone! With laxatives and constipation medicine! At the same time. Not Benny Bobo anymore, someone wheezed between laughs. We've got to call him Benny Poo 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 now! Benny Poo Poo! Another voice picked up the chant. Benny Poo Poo! Benny Poo Poo! The entire guild, or at least the part of it that could laugh without their guts hurting, erupted into chants and laughter. Benny Bobo put his head down on the table and wished desperately that he died from that donut and stayed dead. The Chaos Sorcerer Benny Bobo Chapter 5, The Cookie Catastrophe. 2 weeks had passed since what the guild now referred to as the Great Bowel Incident, or, more commonly, the Night of Brown Rain. Benny had kept his head down during that time, taking simple quests, delivering letters, collecting herbs, which he now had identified by professionals before touching, and doing odd jobs around the city. Slowly, painfully, people were starting to forgive him. At least you haven't poisoned us again, one adventurer had said that morning, clapping him on the shoulder. It was probably the nicest thing anyone had said to him in 2 weeks. Yeah, Benny Poo Poo, just keep your hands away from our food and we'll all stay friends, another had added with a grin. The nickname had stuck, unfortunately. Half the guild called him Benny Bobo, the other half called him Benny Poo Poo, and a creative minority had started calling him the Brown Sorcerer, which Benny absolutely hated. But they were talking to him again, joking with him. He'd even been invited to join a card game the previous evening, though he'd lost spectacularly and owed someone 3 copper renans. Progress. That morning, Benny had decided to walk through the marketplace. He'd earned enough money from his quests to actually afford things now. Real food, supplies, maybe some better clothes that actually fit him instead of Marcus's hand-me-downs. The market was bustling with activity. Merchants called out their wares, haggling filled the air, and the smell of fresh bread mixed with spices and livestock in that uniquely medieval market sort of way. That's when Benny saw them. A merchant's stall displaying small dark berries that looked oddly familiar. They were clustered in little wooden bowls, each berry about the size of a marble, dark brown with a slightly glossy sheen. Benny picked one up and smelled it. Chocolate. It smelled exactly like chocolate. His heart nearly stopped. Is this chocolate? He asked the merchant, a weathered old man with kind eyes. Cacao berries, aye, the man confirmed. Rare commodity, expensive too. 3 silver for a pound. 3 silver was a lot, almost all the money Benny had earned over the past 2 weeks. But chocolate, real, actual chocolate, or at least something close enough that his earth-born taste buds were screaming at him to buy it. I'll take a pound, Benny said, handing over the coins before he could talk himself out of it. As he walked away with his precious cargo, an idea began to form. He knew he was a good cook, or at least he had been back on Earth. His mother had taught him to bake, and he'd made cookies countless times. Chocolate chip cookies, specifically. I can make chocolate chip cookies, he said aloud, earning a strange look from a passing shopper. I'm pretty sure I could do that, and nobody would have a problem with this. It's just cookies. Normal, safe cookies. The more he thought about it, the more excited he became. He could prove to the guild that he wasn't just a walking disaster. He could show them he had actual skills beyond accidentally poisoning people and injuring his own testicles. Benny spent the next hour gathering supplies. Flour from a grain merchant. Sugar, expensive but necessary. Eggs from a farmer. Butter from a dairy stall. Salt, real salt this time, which he confirmed by asking 3 different people to verify it wasn't constipation medicine. He even found something that looked remarkably like baking soda, though it was called rising powder here. He also bought 2 cookie sheets from a kitchen supply vendor, along with mixing bowls and a wooden spoon. By the time he returned to the guild, laden with supplies and ingredients, his coin purse was significantly lighter, but his spirits were high. Martha the cook looked up from her perpetual state of preparing disappointing food as Benny entered the kitchen. "What are you doing in my kitchen?" she asked suspiciously. "I want to make cookies," Benny said. "Real cookies. Not poison cookies." Martha's eyes narrowed. "Real cookies? Not shit cookies?" "Yes, real cookies, I promise. I've made these before back home. They're safe. They're delicious. Everyone will love them." Martha studied him for a long moment. The past 2 weeks had probably been rough on her, too, having to deal with the aftermath of Benny's culinary disasters, cleaning up after dozens of sick adventurers, fielding complaints about the food. Finally, she sighed. "Fine. But I'm watching you, and if people start shitting or puking again, I'm personally throwing you out the window." "Deal." Benny set up his workspace, laying out all his ingredients carefully. He'd done this hundreds of times on Earth. The recipe was burned into his memory from years of baking with his mom on weekends. He started with the butter and sugar, creaming them together in a bowl. The familiar motion was oddly comforting, a connection to his old life that didn't hurt to remember. He added eggs, then the dry ingredients, flour, the rising powder, salt, mixed it all together into a smooth dough. Then came the chocolate. He chopped the cacao berries into small chunks with a knife, marveling at how similar they looked to chocolate chips. When he tasted a tiny piece, it was slightly more bitter than Earth chocolate, but close enough to bring tears to his eyes. He folded the chocolate chunks into the dough, then began forming small balls and placing them on the cookie sheets. Martha watched the entire process with hawk-like attention, occasionally asking what he was doing or why. "My mother taught me," Benny explained as he worked. "Back home, we used to bake together every Sunday." "She taught you well then," Martha admitted. "At least you know what you're doing in a kitchen. Most of these adventurers can't even boil water without burning it." Benny slid the first tray into the oven, a massive brick affair that Martha kept at exactly the right temperature through some combination of wood management and what might have been low-level fire magic. The waiting was agonizing, but then, slowly, surely, the smell began to fill the kitchen. Sweet, rich, chocolatey, the smell of baking cookies. It crept out of the kitchen and into the main hall. Within minutes, Benny could hear the conversation stopping, replaced by confused murmurs. "What is that smell? Something's baking? Is that coming from our kitchen? Did Martha finally learn to cook something good? Or is Benny poisoning us again?" When the timer in Benny's head went off, he'd counted the minutes carefully. He pulled the first tray out. The cookies were perfect. Golden brown edges, slightly soft centers, chocolate chunks melting and glistening. He repeated the process with the second tray, and then a third and fourth until he'd used all the dough. When he was finished, he had enough cookies for everyone in the guild to have at least 2, maybe 3 if people were willing to share. Benny carefully arranged them on serving platters and carried them out to the main hall. The room fell silent as he emerged from the kitchen carrying 2 trays laden with cookies. He set them down on one of the central tables, the warm smell of chocolate and baked goods wafting across the room. "I made cookies," Benny announced. "Chocolate chip cookies. They're safe, I promise." Nobody moved. Everyone stared at the cookies, then at Benny, then back at the cookies. "You promise they're safe?" someone finally asked. "I promise. I've made these before. Many times. They're just normal cookies." Still, nobody moved. Benny sighed, picked up 2 cookies from the tray, and walked over to a corner table. He sat down where everyone could see him and took a bite of the first cookie. It was delicious. The chocolate was slightly different from Earth chocolate, richer, more complex. But the cookie itself was perfect. Crispy edges, chewy center, sweet but not too sweet. He ate both cookies slowly, while the entire guild watched him like he was a science experiment. Then they waited. Minutes passed. Benny sat there, feeling perfectly fine. No stomach cramps, no nausea, no sudden urge to evacuate his bowels or empty his stomach. "See?" he called out. "Perfectly safe." A few brave souls approached the table. Sarah, the woman who'd identified the crapping powder, picked up a cookie and examined it closely. She sniffed it, studied it from multiple angles, then very cautiously took a tiny bite. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God," she breathed. "This is actually good. This is really, genuinely good." That broke the dam. Adventurers swarmed the table, each person grabbing cookies. The praise started immediately. "These are incredible." "Where did you learn to bake like this?" "Benny, you've been holding out on us." "Finally, something from our kitchen that doesn't taste like sadness." Benny watched with growing pride as people devoured the cookies. Most took 2, savoring them slowly. Some took 3. A few greedy individuals grabbed 4 or even 5, stuffing them in their pockets for later. The trays were empty within 10 minutes. Benny felt a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the cookies. He'd done it. He'd made something people enjoyed. No disasters, no poisonings, no catastrophic incidents. "I need to go into town for lunch," he announced to no one in particular. The guild food was still terrible, and he'd earned enough money to afford a real meal. "I'll be back this afternoon to take on a quest." "Bring more cookies next time," someone called out. "Yeah, those were amazing." "Best thing you've ever done for this guild, Benny." Grinning, Benny headed out into the city. He made his way to a tavern he'd been eyeing for a while, the Rusty Anchor, known for good food at reasonable prices. He ordered the special, Anchorman salmon with roasted potatoes covered in butter and something the menu called fire peppers, which he'd had verified were actual peppers and not some kind of intestinal warfare weapon, a tossed salad of mini greens he'd never seen before, and a large glass of herbalist tea. The meal was spectacular. The salmon was perfectly cooked, flaky and rich. The potatoes were crispy on the outside, fluffy on the inside, and the fire peppers added just the right amount of kick. The salad was fresh and crisp, dressed with a tangy vinaigrette, and the herbalist tea, despite its medicinal-sounding name, was actually delicious, with hints of mint and something floral he couldn't identify. Benny ate slowly, savoring every bite, feeling like maybe, just maybe, his life in this world was starting to turn around. After lunch, he paid his tab, 2 silver rennes, which was expensive but worth every copper, and started walking back toward the guild. He was feeling good, confident even. He'd made delicious cookies, earned back some trust, had a great meal, and the afternoon was young. Maybe he'd take on a combat quest, start building up his reputation as an actual adventurer instead of just that kid who keeps accidentally poisoning people. The sun was warm on his face as he approached the guild building. Through the windows, he could see movement inside, people going about their business. He pushed open the door and walked into hell. The smell hit him first, sharp, acrid, the unmistakable stench of vomit. Then the sounds registered, retching, gagging, the wet splatter of people losing their lunch all over the floor, tables, and each other. The main hall was absolute chaos. People were doubled over, hands clamped over their mouths, rushing for windows, buckets, anything they could aim at. Someone was puking directly onto a table. Another person was hanging out a window, their entire body heaving. A third was on their hands and knees, adding to a growing puddle on the floor. "What's happening?" Benny shouted over the sounds of mass illness. "Your cookies!" someone screamed between heaves. "What was in those cookies?" "What? No, they were just normal cookies." A man stumbled toward Benny, one of the adventurers who'd eaten 3 cookies. His face was pale green, sweat pouring down his forehead. "The chocolate," he gasped. "What kind of chocolate did you use?" "Cacao berries. From the market. I bought 'em this morning." Another adventurer who hadn't eaten any cookies, one of the lucky few who'd been out on a quest during cookie time, rushed over with one of the remaining cacao berries that had fallen on the floor during Benny's prep work. She took one look at it and her expression turned to horror. "These are upchuck berries," she shouted. "Upchuck berries, Benny. People use these to induce vomiting when they've been poisoned." "What?" Benny stared at the berry in her hand. But the merchant said, "What merchant? Where?" "The old man in the market square, near the... There's no cacao berry merchant in the market square. Cacao is rare and expensive. You bought these from some random vendor and didn't verify what they were." Behind them, someone projectile vomited across the room, hitting another person who immediately started vomiting in response. It was like a chain reaction of gastrointestinal distress. "How many cookies did people eat?" Benny asked weakly. "Most people had 2 and they're fine," the woman explained. 3 cookies and you're sick. 4 or 5. She gestured at the worst cases. people who were on the floor, unable to even stand, vomiting until they had nothing left and then dry heaving. "I only had 2, Benny said. "That's why I'm fine." "Yeah, and everyone else who had 2 is fine too, but you didn't exactly put a limit on how many people could take, did you?" Sarah stumbled past, her face the color of old cheese. She pointed a shaking finger at Benny. "I ate 3, she moaned. "I thought they were so good I had 3. Then she ran for the nearest bucket. "I've got to go," Benny said, backing toward the door. The smell was overwhelming. The sounds were worse. And the looks people were giving him, those who could still focus their eyes, were murderous. "Benny!" Someone roared from across the hall. "What did you do to us?" Benny turned and ran. He burst out of the guild and into the street, the sounds of vomiting echoing behind him. Behind him he could hear people shouting, "Don't let him leave!" Someone grabbed Benny, "Pook, pook!" But they were all too sick to chase him effectively. Benny ran down the street, his face burning with shame, his mind racing. Upchuck berries. He'd made cookies with upchuck berries. Vomit-inducing berries. How was I supposed to know? He shouted at the universe. "They looked like chocolate! They smelled like chocolate! The merchant said they were cacao!" He needed to get away from the guild, far away, at least for tonight. Benny made his way to the local bathhouse, a public facility where people could bathe for a few copper. He paid for a private room, stripped off his clothes, and sank into the hot water with a groan. Today was not the day to be at the guild. Possibly not this week. Maybe not this month. As he soaked, trying to process the disaster he'd just created, he could hear shouting in the distance. It was coming from the direction of the guild. "Don't let Benny Bobo do any more cooking for the guild!" The voice was loud enough to echo across half the city. Benny slid deeper into the water until just his eyes and nose were above the surface. After his bath, he found a modest inn called the Sleeping Dragon and rented a room for the night. It cost him 5 copper ren, almost all the money he had left after buying the cursed ingredients and his lunch. For dinner, the inn's tavern offered a special: chili with some kind of spicy sausage, a large piece of tasty bread with actual butter, and a glass of something called Elton Brownie, which turned out to be a sweet, chocolate-flavored alcohol that was actually made from real cacao. "So this is what cacao is supposed to taste like," Benny muttered into his glass. Not vomit-inducing berries, actual chocolate. The innkeeper, a friendly woman named Marta, noticed his dejection. "Rough day, young man?" "You have no idea," Benny said. "I accidentally poisoned the entire Adventurers Guild." "Ah, you're that, Benny." She didn't sound surprised. "Word travels fast. We heard about the vomiting. Could we not talk about it?" "Fair enough. The chili's good, though, isn't it?" It was. The chili was rich and spicy, the sausage had a satisfying snap to it, and the bread was fresh and warm. The Elton Brownie helped too. Sweet and warming, it eased some of the tension in his shoulders. After dinner, Benny made his way to his rented room, a simple space with a bed, a small table, and a window overlooking the street. He lay down on the mattress and stared at the ceiling. "I'll deal with the guild tomorrow," he said to the empty room. "Tomorrow, when hopefully nobody wants to murder me anymore. When people have stopped vomiting. When I can show my face without someone throwing up on me." Outside, the city of Mundell settled into its evening rhythm. Voices drifted up from the tavern below. Somewhere a dog barked. Life continued, indifferent to Benny's ongoing series of catastrophic cooking failures. Benny Bobo, also known as Benny Poo Poo, and now probably Benny Pook Pookie, or some other equally embarrassing variation, closed his eyes and tried to sleep. Tomorrow would be better. It had to be. Because honestly, how much worse could it possibly get? The end of Chapter 5. Thank you for reading this edition of the Chaos Sorcerer Benny Bobo. This concludes the first 5 chapters of Benny's misadventures in a fantasy world where his chaos magic and complete lack of local knowledge combine to create spectacular disasters. Stay tuned for more tales of accidental poisonings, testicular trauma, and general mayhem. Each story arc will continue in 5-chapter segments. Like and subscribe for more content featuring our favorite disaster-prone protagonist.